I like that it's the preview show and it's a big one this. Bayern Munich in the Champions League, the type of game that we all sort of dream about. I like, lads, there's a line from Klopp that he's used a few times. I've heard him use it a few times while he's been Liverpool manager, and he says, this is a game I'd pay to watch as a punter. And I just wrote something there for the cipher today, and I've used that line in that because I like when he says that, because I kind of think, you know, if you're a manager, if you're a player, if you're involved in a football club, it maybe gets not as kids in the sweet shop as we are about football. It becomes maybe a job, maybe routine, that type of thing. But this is a big tasty one. You know, a 5 times winner of the Champions League, coming to Anfield, all big balls with the nice big shiny stadium and their stars and all the rest of it. They'll have a decent following, of course. They're like sort of the Man United of Germany, if you like. So it kind of feels like a proper European game that we can get excited about, that we can put the pressure of the Premier League to one side for and all enjoy ourselves tomorrow night. Is that how you're feeling about it, Stu?
Yeah, I think it's a glamour tie, isn't it? It's a glamour name. I think Bayern Munich, the way they see themselves, you just called them the Manchester United of the Bundesliga, and I think they probably do see themselves as a bigger and shinier club than Liverpool. They're wrong, but I think that's probably the way they see themselves, and they've got used to being spoilt, if you like, over the last few years within their league. And yeah, I think it's the type of name that you look forward to playing when it's the whole reason that you want to finish in the top 4, you know, to be in the Champions League, to have nights like this. I think what's really interesting about it, though, although they see themselves as this huge club, it's really interesting to see actually how many of their players have been coming out in the press over the last few days and making a point about how Liverpool are the favourites for this tie. So there's a bit of mind games going on already, but I also think that demonstrates how psychologically we are a worry now for these teams.
I think so, yeah.
You know, I think of the teams that finished second, no one wanted us. So as much as it's a big glamour night for us, I think it's possibly the worst possible outcome for Bayern, really, in terms of a draw.
I mean, they're a strange one in a way, aren't they, Rob? Because, you know, I mentioned the 5 European Cups, obviously 28 times German champions as well. And if you sort of look at the recent history, you know, they've won the Bundesliga 6 times in a row. They've reached the semi-finals of the Champions League in 5 of those seasons as well. You know, everyone's saying they're off for a little bit, but they're still not far off Dortmund at the top of the league right now. So it's hard to sort of gauge where they're at, but most people that sort of watch them, most people that talk about them seem to be saying, you know, they're not what they once were. They've got a few injuries as well. Obviously, Muller is suspended rather than injured because he was sent off against Ajax. Robben hasn't played since November. Ribery only just recently returned from injury. He's just had a kid and is coming over on a separate flight, but is available. Toliso's out. Koeman was a doubt, but they expect him to be fine. Boateng's out of the squad, some kind of stomach problem. So, you know, I think we can get sort of caught up on maybe our own problems, and we'll come into that later, talk about the centre-back situation, but they're not in a perfect situation themselves. And, you know, maybe it is a bit kidology, all this, we're not favourites, we've seen that before. But maybe actually some of them are saying that because they don't believe that.
Yeah, Bayern used to be in about 8 clear at this stage of the season, just into the sunset, and the league is just not a concern for them. It's a procession. They're, as we speak, I think they're a couple of points off Dortmund. Dortmund have a game in hand as well. They've been beaten 6 times in the league, four times on their travels, but they have won 9 of their last 10 in the league quietly. But the last one was a bit typical of their season in microcosm. They go to Augsburg, they fall behind, they get back into it, and they actually snatch the game late on, but no one's convinced. You can just see the bookies odds. If you look at the list of favourites for the Champions League, they're quite a way down there. I don't think, look, they're good enough. You look at their team sheet to come to Anfield to win this tie. They are good enough. Let's just say that outright. They're not rubbish by any stretch of measure. But I think if they're talking internally at the top of that club, they do not expect Bayern Munich to be winning the European Cup this season. They may get through a tie like this, but are they going to survive this, then Barcelona, then Juventus, and then whoever, Real Madrid in the final? I don't think they fancy themselves to be able to raise themselves that much. This right now, they would take narrowly pipping Dortmund to the title. Same on the other hand, for us, you talked about excitement this week. Would you pay to watch it? It's a glamour tie. In a way, it's a perfect European tie because not that much is riding on it for us, really. It's a bit of a bonus one. I wouldn't say it's a free hit because it's never a free hit. It's Anfield. We have our pride. We want to win this. We want to believe we can still win the European Cup. But we are all about the league this season. We're all in for that. So I'm much more tense about Sunday and Man U than I am about this. I'm actually looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again on the sort of weirdness of Bayern at the moment. I mean, Rob mentions that no one's really sort of tipping them to win the whole thing, and he's right to say that because you can get 14-1 on Bayern Munich to win the European Cup. Liverpool are 9-1, fifth favourites behind City, Barcelona, PSG and Juventus. In terms of sort of what else we know about Munich currently, they haven't kept a clean sheet this year so far. The group they came through, they got through it unbeaten. That was with Ajax, Benfica and AEK Athens, so not the toughest group really. I mean, you've watched a bit of them. You were talking a little bit before we started about that. You know, what have you made of what you've seen so far of them?
Well, I think the season very much is being carried on Lewandowski's shoulders. No surprise there. I think he's got 25 goals so far. It was interesting that the doubt about Kingsley. I think he's really important for them on the left wing, but he's actually, I think he's only scored 2 goals in the league. I think he's scored in other competitions, but I think he's only scored twice in the league so far this season.
In his last game.
Yeah, in his last game. Yeah. So I expect, you know, if he's fit, I expect a lot of the threat to come down his side really, and he'll be trying to pen Trent in and trying to be crosses from the byline, which Lewandowski depends on. And I think, you know, when we've seen Trent manage that situation successfully before, you know, against Sané against City last year. But we've also seen him struggle against Rashford the week before, I think last year as well. So I think that's going to be a really important battle for us. I also think one of their main threats will come from the full-back area with Kimmich on the other side. If he's allowed to come forward, you know, I suspect Bayern will probably defend quite deep, but if he is allowed to come forward, his crosses again can be really dangerous, but there'll be a bit of a battle, I think, a bit of a psychological war between him and Mane, because unlike Alaba on the other side, Kimmich isn't great at getting back. He isn't, you know, he wasn't naturally a full-back by trade, he was a midfielder, and I think, you know, if he is enticed to come forward and put a few balls in, then there could be scope for a quick counter-attack on the break, although that might be something we see more in the second leg, I suspect, because I think there'll be more onus on them to come and attack us then. So I wouldn't be surprised if Bayern sit deep and try and nick a goal on the counter if they can, probably from wide areas looking to get crosses in. But I think for them, they'll feel if they can score and they can keep it to a 2-1 loss or a 3-1 loss, they'll feel that they're still in it going back to Munich.
Well, they've conceded 34 in all competitions, Rob, which is the most they've conceded at this stage of the season since 2010-11. So, you know, that allied with what I already said about the clean sheets, you kind of fancy Liverpool to be getting at them and scoring a goal, don't you?
Yeah, it's whether they back themselves, as Stu said, do they back themselves to suddenly be able to be a defensive unit against Liverpool's attacking might and be compact? And we discussed beforehand, Stu, about whether they bring in another midfielder and drop out one of their usual front four, and that would be James Rodriguez. So do they play with a degree of conservatism? You know, they'll have watched the tapes. They will know Liverpool are a mighty force at Anfield, especially on European nights, and they've got to play the crowd as much as us. But they know that their best attributes are going forward still. And maybe trying to score 1 and 2. Maybe that's the way to go about it. I don't know, it's a fascinating game. I think that actually might be, well, a pretty open and an exciting game to watch.
I think the team sheet, when that drops, that'll tell us everything really. If they go with a 4-3-3 and they draft in Javi Martinez and drop Rodriguez to the bench and go with that more solid 4-3-3 rather than the 4-2-3-1 that they've been going through recently, I think that'll tell us all about their tactical shape going into the game, their mentality going into the game, if they're just going to try and defend deep and try and come away with something that they can take back to Munich. Whereas if they come with the 4-2-3-1 and Rodriguez plays in a 10 role, then we could be in for a bit of an end-to-end game really, and I'd fancy, I mean, either way I'd fancy us to come out on top, but I think from a neutral's point of view we could be in for a really exciting game if that's the case.
Let's hope so. Well, Liverpool haven't been beaten in a European match at Anfield since the 3-0 group stage defeat by Real Madrid in October 2014. So we're no soft touch. But quite how the game will pan out, we don't know yet, of course. But there's John Gibbons now standing in for Neil Atkinson with the tactics board to look at how things might go at Anfield.
Liverpool v Bayern Munich, absolutely can't wait for this one. In terms of Liverpool, we're all expecting them really to set up with a 4-3-3. That's how we've played in most games this season, especially kind of in Europe with those three midfielders and the three up top, the Fab three, if you like, kind of up there. What he does up there with Firmino and Salah, how he interchanges them, their starting positions, a little bit up for grabs, I suppose, but in terms of how we're expecting the shape of Liverpool to be, we're all expecting that 4-3-3. Bayern might throw a little bit of a curveball. I'll just sort of talk you through that now. Most of the time this season, they've played with a sort of 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3, if you like, depending on how high you want these forwards up and what you're doing with the kind of midfield shape. But it's generally been a 4-2-3-1, how they've played in the league. They have looked to push up these forward players, especially off the ball. They've looked to press the fullbacks up high, keep them deep. Whether they'll risk that with our fullbacks, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, it's Lewandowski there up front, who's got 8 goals so far in the Champions League, so always one to watch, but you don't need me to tell you that. That's how they play most of the time this season, but I've been having a little look at their Champions League games this season and what they did against Ajax, which was their toughest Champions League game. What they did away at Ajax was quite interesting, and they played a much deeper 4-4-2. They haven't seen much for Bayern. They let Ajax have the ball, which is very un-Bayern as well. They let them have control of the ball, and they basically set up to frustrate. So if you imagine Liverpool's midfield being there looking for the ball, even the forwards were fairly deep, and when the defenders had the ball, when the Ajax defenders had the ball, they almost invited Ajax to pass through them, and they set up looking for loose balls and looking to counter. Very un-Bayern way of playing, but it worked for a while. For 60 minutes they were 1-0 up, they were controlling it and looking good. The game went a bit crazy, they ended up drawing it 3-3. Lots of mistakes really were the reasons why Ajax got back into the game. Bayern then went 3-2 up, but then conceded an own goal in the last minute. So the manager might be looking at it. Will he look at the first 60 minutes where it worked, or the last 30 minutes where mistakes creeped in? That'll be how he judges it. But don't be surprised if you see a little cheeky 4-4-2 from Bayern Munich tomorrow.
Nice one to Gibbo there. I never even introduced these gentlemen, but you should know who they are by now. Stu Wright and Rob Gutmann. So looking at recent form then, I mean, you know what Liverpool's is. We don't have to run through that. But Bayern Munich's, we mentioned earlier that they beat Augsburg 3-2 on Friday. Before that, they beat Schalke 3-1 at home. They won 3-2 at Hertha Berlin. They got beat 3-1 by Bayer Leverkusen, and they won 4-1 at Stuttgart. So that's an indication of their recent form, if you know anything about the Bundesliga. History-wise as well, a bit of a weird one. You know, for such a big club, we haven't played them very much in history, only 7 times. The last time in 2001, the Super Cup, beat them 3-2. You were at that one, Rob. Enjoy yourself that day?
That was a lovely day out, lovely evening out actually. A balmy evening in the south of France. It was great. I think we roar into a 3-0 lead and they pull a couple of late goals back. I thought that was a particularly good Bayern Munich side. Actually, the most recent time we played them was a friendly. Do you remember, a couple of years ago? We went there and absolutely battered them. Beginning of last season, I think it was. 3-0. I actually said after that game, we're more equipped to win the European Cup than the league. We could be a force in Europe, and lo and behold, it turned out that way. I know it was a friendly, but it felt like a proper game.
Yeah, famously, of course, we played them in the European Cup in the semis in 81. Yeah, but I mean, not much we can take from that. But in terms of Liverpool's team, then we haven't really done Liverpool too much. We just banged on about Bayern, but everyone knows by now that Van Dijk is, of course, suspended. It doesn't look like Lovren's going to make it even to the bench by what's being said so far today. So he's still struggling with a hamstring issue. Gomez, of course, we know is long-term injured. So it's likely to be Fabinho or Henderson, by all indications, to partner Matip. Who would you prefer out of those two to partner Matip in central defence?
I think it swings and roundabouts really, because I think I trust Fabinho more naturally, I think, to do a job at centre half, but you're missing him then in midfield. So and
he's played well there.
And he's played really, really well. But I think I'd go with Fabinho at centre half and Henderson in the number 6 role. But I think the big question is going to be all about whether Shaqiri plays and whether we go back to a 4-2-3-1 or whether we stick with the 4-3-3 that's worked so well in the last game.
I can't see Shaqiri. I think it's 4-3-3 this, because it's a big side at home. I think he's more likely to do that. And Keita gives you is a good little link man between a 4-3-3 and a 4-2-3-1 in a way. When he gets more progressive and breaks the line between those lines, it can look like a 4-2-3-1 anyway at times. So I'd be stunned if Shaqiri started, wouldn't you?
That's what I want. I'd like us to go 4-3-3.
Yeah.
In the shape that you're saying there with Henderson, Wijnaldum and Keita in midfield.
Yeah.
I think that would be the right decision. But there's just a little part of me that wouldn't entirely be surprised if Klopp thinks it's the home leg. Shaqiri used to play for these. Let's go 4-2-3-1.
Two Bundesliga players.
Slow at the back. It just wouldn't surprise me.
So no Keita, Shaqiri comes in.
That's not what I'd do.
No, it's interesting.
I wouldn't be entirely surprised if Klopp thinks I'll do this in the home leg, whereas in the away leg I'll go 4-3-3.
Well, Shaqiri apparently is still struggling a little bit with an abdominal issue, so that might influence that one. But on the Keita thing, I was going to ask you about that anyway. Does it come into his thinking at all that he played in the Bundesliga, that he'll know the opponents? Is that a factor? Is it a factor as well about that we know basically he's basically played him into form, hasn't he? He's known that he could have played Henderson and things like that. He's stuck with him. He's got him to a level where the last game he played, most people were like, well, that's probably Keita's best performance for the club. So do you go with him again for that reason as well?
I definitely would. And I think that, although I wouldn't say that he's flying at the moment, we've definitely seen an upturn in his form and it's come just at the right moment. And I think this game could be massive for him, because if he does have that extra sense of belief because he's played against these players before, he's done them damage before, then if we get a huge game from him, then it could actually be the platform that makes his Liverpool career take off.
And about, you mentioned before that you're sort of more worried about United at the weekend than you are about this one. Any sort of factors there at play in terms of the team selection, do you think?
No, I don't think so. There's a 5 days recovery, and United actually have only got 6 because they play in the cup game tonight as we're recording it. So I don't think anything. I think he goes hell for leather. Best team tonight, best team against United. Tactically, there may be some tweaks. He said there's the Shaqiri factor with the injury. I agree with Stu. I'd go with Keita. I actually think he will. I mean, he made comments the other day that Keita was almost his first name on his team sheet because he wants to play him into form, because he knows the player he can be. So let's see. Yeah, 4-3-3, I think.
Well, just one more thing to get you in the mood, for another little stat for you to go, okay, these aren't that good. Bayern have already lost as many games in the League 4 as they did in 2017-18. And in the 2 previous seasons, they only lost twice in the league all season. So something's going on there. Let's hope Liverpool can take advantage. Thanks to the boys, thanks to John Gibbons. That's been the preview show. There is, of course, lots and lots more on the Anfield app. On the AnfieldApp.com, there'll be Rob's written preview, for instance. There'll be a piece every day like there always is. There's a free podcast out there as well, if you're a bit of a minge bag. And if you fancy subscribing and you want to have a go of all the paid-for content, go to the Anfield app, /subscribe and have a go of it. It's getting lots of plaudits, lots of people like it. We must be doing something right. That's the Anfield app. Up the Reds.